Welcome to Go FUD Yourself, the DeFi Kingdoms edition. Ceara here with my good friend Bolon. How are you?
Good. Hey, been a while since we've been on stream together, but not the first time.
I feel like it's been too long. Maybe we should have a more regular cadence.
Let's go. Let's do it.
Mostly because I don't think anyone else compares to our joint idiocy on a stream.
It's pretty impressive. We reach levels that are previously unseen. So
Like, you know how most people on streams together, they think that they have good rapport or they present really interesting opinions. Maybe they get a new outlook on something. We just bicker.
yeah. I do still remember the story about your party though, and I'm still kind of jealous about it.
I'm sure that's not how you want to fill a stream though.
I still have a tab open with those alligators because I need to order them.
Give me your address. I'll send you an alligator, an inflatigator. You have to know that the inflatigators have been requested for my friend's 40th birthday party. She got a bouncy castle, and she was like, "Can you bring the inflatigators so we can ride them in the bouncy castle?"
See? There's merit.
Okay.
A lot of fun.
Today, in theory, we're going to talk about Binance, and then we're going to talk about America because you're American.
I am. Well,
yeah.
I'm Canadian. I don't know if we count.
We'll talk about freedom units. I don't know. And then last I heard, Avalanche is dead, which means DeFi Kingdoms is out. So are you ready to talk about all that?
Let's go.
Bolon, I didn't bother to come up with a clever title for Binance. Should it have been like Binance Blues or something?
I love how punk y'all look in that video real quick. Just real quick side note. Like that is just full punk mode in that video. But
are you implying that I'm not typically a punk? I don't think you've met me in person.
I mean, I haven't, but
we meet and I just headbutt you. It's just
I don't think you're that punk rock. I don't.
Do you think JD's that punk? Definitely when I see JD, that's what I identify him as.
I'd believe it sooner.
No way.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna go get my battle jacket and prove you wrong. Okay.
About Binance.
Binance Blues. Binance is having a bad day, probably. One of the things that I really like about Binance news before we actually get started is that every time there's a story about Binance, people reach out to CZ to get some sort of comment.
Right.
And recently he's just been applying with emojis.
You know what? I respect it though. Like
that's my favorite. That's a power move.
It is. Like if I'm CZ, like come on. I got things to do other than like full-blown Twitter explanations to everybody who tags me. The emojis just you gotta respect the play.
You know, I went to business school and we like had to take a class on power moves. And they included like really strong handshakes or like what you were wearing or eating at a meeting was a power move. We did not get briefed on emoji usage.
I just like what a great use of tuition money. But also apparently I do a power move every meeting because if there's food, I'm eating it. And it's not about power. It's about I like food. But whatever.
All right, so Binance and the CFTC. I think I'm getting internet rugged, so if I don't make sense, you have to take it.
Yeah, your audio seems to be coming through, but your video is a little jumpy.
Crappy. So the CFTC and Binance have been negotiating, and they decided to stop negotiating and not settle, and they're going to go to court.
Well, I don't think they're going to court either yet, right? They basically just said wait. Yep. But I will say, you know, I feel like this really highlights the difference. And, you know, let's just get into the bashing early, right? Let's just start off strong. This really highlights the difference, in my opinion, between the CFTC and the SEC. The two are in a very similar situation. Neither of them has clear guidelines. Neither of them really know what they have authority over and what they don't in the crypto space. Neither of them really know what the legalities around anything in the crypto space is, mostly because there are none, because none
Because
of
they
them.
didn't make any. Yeah.
Right, because they don't exist. But the difference is, you look at the CFTC, they've been, in talks with Binance, right? They sent them the letter, said, hey, we think you might be doing illegal stuff. Binance said, hey, no, we're not. And ever since, they've been like, okay, let's just keep talking, and I don't really know. Now they're
It
really,
sounds like the worst date ever.
yeah, no, it basically
You're like,
is.
hey, I think you were flirting with the waiter. And they're like, no, I wasn't.
But
Now
also
what?
the American taxpayer is paying for their $800 dinner. But and also I missed a zero. That's at least an $8,000 dinner. But anyway, and that's each dinner. But essentially, I mean, the CFTC just said, like, okay, we think you might be doing something illegal. You don't think it's illegal. We can't prove it is. You can't prove it's not. So for right now, we're just kind of gonna hold and see what happens and ask people to make laws that make sense so that we can determine if what you're doing is illegal or not. Then you look at the SEC and Coinbase, and the SEC is just coming out swinging, like, nope. Oh yeah, American acronyms. The SEC is just coming out swinging, like, no, what you're doing is illegal. And the biggest irony is that they approved their IPO to do everything that they're doing that they're now telling them is illegal. But whatever.
Well, this is part of why Coinbase wants to pull out and why Binance is looking at pulling out.
Right.
If we don't have regulation, you can't enforce without regulation. Well,
Right.
I mean,
Well,
parents did that when we were
you
children.
shouldn't
Right?
enforce without. Yeah, regulation by policing is not the same thing.
It seems pretty corrupt, actually, when you frame it that way.
I wonder why.
Weird. It's interesting that you say that the SEC gave the go-ahead to Coinbase and then rescinded it, because one of the other things in Binance news today, some people are saying that this is in response to the whole CFTC thing, but so many acronyms to the CFTC thing. But essentially, Voyager, for anybody who doesn't know, Voyager Digital was essentially like a brokerage for institutions, I believe, in the crypto space. And they went bankrupt, or they're going bankrupt, and that sucks. And so they were looking for a way forward. And Binance offered to buy them out, essentially, so that they could pay back some of the brokers and then continue operating and thus expanding their business. It's like the cheapest way to do an MA. Good for them, Binance. Anyway, Binance wrote them a letter that said, we're not going to buy you out with $1 billion anymore. And when asked for comment, is this because of the CFTC? Z said, but it could be. But what was really interesting, I found from this news article, is that they being Binance and Voyager, got permission from the US government to do this deal. But they're also worried about getting pinned for it because it's been expressed that it is like tax fraud, essentially.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense.
Well, it's lack of clarity in the market around regulation is just bad for the market, just all around. And I mean, I can't really blame Binance. They're watching crypto.com, or not, sorry, they're watching Coinbase get nailed for something that was approved that they're now trying to nail them for. I can't really blame Binance for not wanting to end up in the same boat. Because you tell me today that it's fine for me to do this, then I do it, I pay them $1 billion, and now you tell me it's not fine, and now I'm liable. Why would I pursue that? Like, how about you figure out if this is okay or not?
The other thing I really like about this is how pro Binance people still are. Right? Nobody's been like, well, Binance should, I mean, in the crypto sphere, nobody's like, well, Binance should really get it together and figure out what they're doing. Everyone's just like, hey, you know what? Do you guys list Floki now? Awesome.
Yeah, well, I think the whole, Binance should get it together and figure out what you're doing has just been true for years. So it's just not in the news
over.
Right. We're used to that. But now this part, that's not on them.
But yeah, it's kind of interesting. So sometimes when you see people in the news or companies in the news where they are dealing with SEC or the CFTC or the FBI or the what other acronyms you guys got?
CIA, ATF.
Any
It's
of those, whatever. If people are dealing with any sort of legality issue, oftentimes you see cash be pulled out, especially in terms of banks. But with Binance, because it all just seems so up in the air and, and there's such a lack of clarity, people aren't pulling their cash out of Binance. If anything, they're happy to list new coins, buy new coins, keep investing. It's not like Binance is really suffering from this, right?
No. Well, I think, for one thing, because people aren't because people don't know if it's a problem or not, they're just erring on it's not, because realistically it- the odds of anything coming back onto individual users is
Is this like they can't catch all of us?
right. Yeah.
Is this a game of
Basically.
Red Rover?
But and then, you also just run into limited options. There's only so many ways to onboard to Web3. There's only so many ways to do these trades. So, when you look at Binance, okay, they're talking to the CFTC. Okay, well, maybe that makes me uncomfortable, so I'll go to Coinbase. Oh, wait, can't go to Coinbase. There's just only so many places you can go if it's something that you want to do. So you make the move that you decide to make, and yeah, for right now, that seems to be ignore it.
Well, and the other move people don't want to make is banking. Nobody wants to put their money in a bank right now, as we're seeing with First Republic Bank, which is, also dying a slow death, much like SVB. And
Yes.
I don't know. I guess I would keep my money in Binance more than a bank, maybe. I'm not American. I feel like this doesn't apply to me the same way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, is anywhere safe at this time? Are you going to start hoarding gold under your bed?
Shoot. I mean, no, nowhere is safe is the short version, in my opinion. That said, I think a lot of it depends on how much money and like what you're wanting to do with it. Because one thing that has held true so far is if you have money in an FDIC insured bank, another acronym for you, as long as it's below the FDIC insurance limit, they haven't not paid yet. And so,
Okay.
it kind of just depends on how much money you have. And that's where, like, we talk about diversification of your portfolio, right? I apply that to banking. I don't keep all my money in a single bank. I keep my money in multiple banks, because if one of them goes under, I'm confident I'll get my money back. But how long is that going to take? If it takes the FDIC to 60 days to send me my funds, and that's all of my funds, it's going to be a real rough 60 days. So, I apply that even just to traditional banks of,
Mhm.
have a couple places, have access to your own funds.
It's funny that you talk about that. When I was a young teenager, like about 13, I was growing up in rural Alberta. I went to every bank in that town. There were 3, and I opened an account at every bank. And I put like whatever, $400 in each
Right.
of them. And then I saved up. I traveled and stuff when I was a teenager. I did all kinds of things, but I never kept my money in the same accounts. And I would have like a 30-day GIC or something like that, because I'm
Mhm.
like trying to be a 15-year-old financial guru. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know what I was doing, but the bank tellers thought it was hilarious. They were like, "We normally can't even open an account for you without your parents here, but also like, what are you doing, crazy child?" And I remember saying to them, like, "What if you lose access to my funds?"
Yeah.
And, in rural Alberta, nobody had ever never considered that
Yeah.
might be an option, right?
Right. Well, I mean, even as
So
simple as the bank not going under, but your account gets compromised. We
absolutely.
see it in Web3 all the time. It happens in Web2 also. Mine has been compromised many times, unfortunately. It's super annoying. Do I always get my money back? Absolutely. I have never not gotten my money back, but it takes time.
Totally.
You got to have funds in the meantime.
So we're kind of talking about Web 2, Web 3. What I think is interesting in our further American acronyms is the Department of Justice and
Hey,
market
you talked a
manipulation.
Canadian one a minute ago.
Market manipulation, because so we actually saw this case go to court. I believe it was in March. And now we're seeing the outcome of it, which is whatever. It's the least bureaucratic thing I've ever seen come out of America. It's amazing. It's pretty fast.
You're not wrong.
um, but the concept here is that people used a trading bot to manipulate the crypto price of Hydro. And they essentially the trading bot was going to irregularly purchase hydro at way too high of a price or bid at too high of a price. And then it drove the market up and down and what have you. And I don't know, this is kind of like insider trading in a way, but it's more market manipulation. What's interesting to me is that we are able to actually police this because it's something that already happens in Web 2 and pre-web. Like market manipulation has been going on since before money, I'm sure.
Yes. Yeah, no, I mean, I think this is something that is really a positive sign for the industry overall, is people enforcing against bad actors in the industry. Uh, you know, yeah, like you said, this isn't new. Like this isn't, oh, Web3, let them do this. No, this is old. People get arrested for insider trading like on a regular basis. Uh, but having some kind of actual enforcement in the crypto sphere, I think is a very positive thing, because one of the biggest issues in the crypto sphere is the risk side, because there's no accountability, right? And so obviously with that, we again need regulation that makes sense, that is clear, like all of that also still has to happen. But just the fact that we are willing to say, yes, this was in crypto, but what you did was still illegal and you're going to have the same consequences. To me, that's a good thing. We need to hold people accountable.
Well, how do you think that translates to, let's jump right into the SEC and Gensler. How do you think that translates when we're saying that the SEC's digital asset laws, or the SEC's laws, are outdated in terms of digital assets? How can you say that the Department of Justice has done right by targeting market manipulation on one end, but then on the other end say that they shouldn't cover digital assets?
So I don't necessarily, let me back up. The SEC should not cover
It
digital
was a
assets.
loaded question. I purposely loaded it. So.
Hey, that's all right. I don't think the SEC should cover digital assets. It would be the CFTC, because they are not securities. However, the CFTC can still enforce the same way as what just happened with those guys. But the laws are not clear enough. The regulations are not up to date. They happened to get charged with a crime that has been around for a long time and is applicable across all of these different like layers of technology, we'll call it. But realistically, most of those current regulations don't apply very well to digital assets. So the market manipulation is market manipulation, whether it's a digital asset, tangible asset. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's gold. It's the same concept across the board. So I think it's a little bit easier to still be able to say like market manipulation is illegal. But as far as most of like the consumer protections don't apply at all to digital assets, which isn't good. Most of the like regulations for how things are classified. So I said I think they should belong to the CFTC, right? But even that, where do they belong? Nobody knows. That's why the SEC and CFTC are in a yeah, they're in a pissing match over who gets to claim them, because none of that is clear. So that's where it leads to market uncertainty, which I mentioned earlier, but it also leads to a lot of fear, people not willing to get into investing in crypto, but also people not willing to develop in crypto because they don't want to end up being held liable for something that makes no sense, that they have no idea exists, et cetera, because 2 years from now, we decide that it's X and what you did was illegal. So I still think that some laws and regulations can be enforced now, but the vast majority of them are absolutely out of date, and we just don't have consumer protections at all.
Do you feel that we're going to lose the wild, wild west of crypto with regulation?
Inevitably.
Does that bother you?
Yes. So yes, it does, but I think it's the only way that crypto can grow and become mass adopted. Like the vast majority of people are not going to get into crypto with no kind of regulation, no kind of protection. Just like the vast majority of people didn't migrate west. Like, you have to have a level of risk tolerance, a level of personal accountability, in order to make that move. And I think if we want mass adoption of crypto, we are going to have regulation, which will in turn also reduce. So I actually said this on a random stream with one of our community members, but America has been, in my opinion, the greatest experiment of freedom versus security that's ever happened. And as time has gone on, we have traded more and more freedoms for more and more securities. Whether that's good or bad, I'm going to not comment on. But that's what's happened. And I think crypto is going to be the same thing. Right now, there's next to no security and almost entire freedom. And then I think those will slowly move towards a middle ground of how much are we willing to give up for what security. And that really comes down to what security are we gaining and how valuable is that will determine how much freedom everybody's willing to give up for it.
Freedom, security is an interesting scale. It's one that definitely every country has, whether we acknowledge it or not, right?
Yes.
And from my perspective, the war on terrorism really highlighted that one for America. But I, being old school, I really like the fear-love scale of Donnie Darko. Yeah. And I've been talking about that a lot in crypto, is like, do you have the ability to trust and collaborate, or are you looking for somebody to look out for you all the time? Do you live in fear of...
Your dog was living in fear for a second.
It's garbage day, and the garbage truck is very scary.
Yep.
So yes, he is living in fear. But I often think about this in terms of crypto, or even other sorts of hobbies crypto as a hobby, other sort of, not a lifestyle, other sorts of... Sorry, Bolon.
Be on the podcast.
He's a big monster of a dog, and he's just trying to keep me safe from recycling.
Yep, exactly.
Also compost. You know how it goes. JD and I have talked a little bit about how we don't have a Costco of crypto. So there's nowhere that you can go and be unhappy with your crypto purchase and take it back a year later, right? Mm-hmm. And that's part of why some of us really like crypto, because we have an internal sense of self, as opposed to the world happens to us, we happen to the world. So we have an internal sense of locus, which means I'm here and I can do this and everything's going to be as okay as I let it be. So then we're in this fear-love scale, right? And even if you are on the love side, you can still experience loss and a lack of security without it necessarily impacting your persona, right? It's really interesting because we have all these op-eds coming out about Gensler. And I wonder if we have already pushed people way too far to the fear side because of all of the fear mongering that Gensler has been doing. Like, I don't know if America or North America can come back from the crypto FUD after this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's gonna be in the article that's from talked a lot about it. It was actually a really good article. I recommend anybody who's listening go read that article. It was very good. But it made the point that I fully agree with. I think this is going to be one of the trademark issues of our next presidential election.
This is directly from that article, which we link on Twitter.
Yep.
But it's so mainstream now. Crypto is so mainstream now that it's being politicized, which is kind of a win, because that means that we're winning the adoption curve, but is kind of a loss because no.
Yes. Oh, yeah. No, I definitely agree. It's a double-edged sword, but to get to the point that I think we all want crypto to get to, we need attention on it. Unfortunately, attention brings attention, and that's not always a good thing. But I think this is going to be one of the big issues of our next election. Personally,
oh man, there's going to be so much news. You're going to have to come and report on Florida news.
Oh God, we don't really. Our news is just about whatever latest crazy stunt somebody pulled.
Do you know that's because you have less security protection than other states, like data security?
That is true.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I don't know.
Florida,
So the other thing that I thought was this article points this out, but is something that we talk about on this show pretty often as well, is
mhm.
that crypto natives aren't necessarily aligned either.
Yeah,
So the inconsistency that Gensler is displaying in enforcement but not regulation is almost mirrored in us acting as though we don't know what's happening, right? Like a lot of people in crypto, like, well, I didn't know that was going to become illegal, can be a real sentiment if it's something that obviously like that is new and different and digital asset
right.
wise. But like, well, I didn't know market manipulation in crypto was going to be illegal. Is right. We're seeing this kind of double standard that we're setting for ourselves, but we
Yeah.
also see a split on a lot of the language. So
Mhm.
every time I'm sure I'm loved on Twitter. Every time I'm on Twitter and I see someone refer to something as an LSD, so liquid staking derivative,
Oh, yeah,
you are
okay.
already setting yourself up to be regulated in such a way that it is not a new digital asset. If you
Right.
use a term like LST, which is liquid staking token, now we have the argument that it could be something different. But because we've already set this precedent of like half the people believing that it's a derivative and half of them not believing it, now we've set ourselves up for regulation and for a really poor place in terms of lobbying, right?
Yeah, yeah, I yes. And that's where, I think it's inevitable with new growth, like a new industry like crypto has been, that, you know, you're kind of figuring things out, and sometimes, it's not necessarily the best people to be figuring that out. And I don't mean that, that's not against anyone who has been in that position, but if you're not the chairman of the SEC, it's kind of hard. And so, like, I think it will all catch up to equal out. I do think that, especially thank you, social media, there is a lot more ammo to be used potentially against some of the regulations that we would prefer to see because of comments made, things said, acronyms used, even just generally monikers used. I do think that there's a chance that some level of common sense comes into play, and it's taken, depending on the topic, as like a, well, that's the most comparable, like we're trying to use that so people know what we're talking about. But I absolutely also think that it will be used against us.
Okay, so we've talked about the SEC, we've talked about the DOJ, we've talked about the CFTC, we've talked about some banks and Binance, which has its own acronym, BNB. All you've stated really clearly, like innovation is difficult in a time of security, right? Because we don't want to take any risk. So, do you think that DeFi is dead in America? Is that
Not even
it?
a little bit. No. Uh, so, uh, multiple reasons. One, people always want to take risk. So, you got to be cautious. You got to, DYOR, for another acronym. You got to be smart about what you're doing. But people love to take risk. Like that, it's an inherent nature of people. Uh, but more and more so, DeFi is the opportunity to get away from the traditional banking system, which, as we've seen, is not always doing so well. And DeFi is also the opportunity to have more freedom. We already talked about it. So right now it's a lot of freedom. Even as that freedom comes down, I don't think that freedom, at least for a very long time, will reach the same balance as what traditional finance has right now. I think that it will remain somewhat less secure and more free. And so I think that's a place that people will continue to look to, continue to go and invest, because they want that more individual freedom. Which is actually another thing that was referenced in that. I really liked that article, but it was also referenced in that article about,
Good article.
telling people that them not being in the market is good for them is never an accurate statement.
So one of the things that I like to look at is we get, Bitcoin's died over 400 times, and we get news about DeFi being dead or crypto's being dead. So yesterday, the hot news was Chamath said that from the All In podcast. He said, crypto is dead in America. And one of the counter arguments I always have to that is to look and see what just got funded.
Right.
And there were 3 different announcements of just over $20 million each of direct funding, VC funding to DeFi crypto projects in America last night. So from that sense, I never think that DeFi is dead. But then we have a pretty cool big one, which is Google Cloud Platform.
Yes.
So they have onboarded a variety of different firms into their Web3 startup venture. They've had that going on for a little while. They work with different technologies to see what's going on, but this is basically about real-time blockchain data. So Alchemy, Aptospace, Cello, Flow, Hedera, Nansen, Near, Polygon, Solana, and ThirdWeb. And that's just yesterday. So that's bolstering all those who are already part of that program. Yep. I feel like Google has lost a little bit of its marketplace legitimacy with the whole AI mishap. But they're still leading. And so when somebody with that much money in cloud is investing in Web3, I can't possibly say, yes, DeFi is dead.
Right. Well, is Google perfect? No. But Google's Google. They're big.
Careful, they'll get you.
I know, right? They're big. They make pretty sound investment choices, which is what has gotten them to where they are today. And I mean, honestly, they're at a point where with their size and their reach and their funding, I mean, they're almost just a market maker in themselves of Absolutely. If we decide to invest into crypto, we'll make crypto successful. And they're not entirely wrong. How many people can honestly say that they don't use Google on a daily basis? If Google starts slapping crypto up in places, it's going to get in front of people and it's going to be seen and it's going to grow the industry. So getting big players in, again, double-edged sword. You bring in, old money, old tendencies, old regulations, but they have reach. Like there's a reason that they still get in. So I like that to me is massive news.
I think so too. So I have to ask, I have one more big loaded question for you. Okay. Is Avalanche dead?
Along with DeFi.
There's been a surprising number of articles about how Avalanche is not going to make it through the bear market, like over the last year. Which I'm sure is why they're having Avalanche Barcelona, is to just get everyone in one room and tell them that they're discontinuing. So
yeah, absolutely.
The latest one was, I think you found it just yesterday, that Avalanche might in fact not make it out of this bear market alive. Because
definitely. Yeah. So I will say first and foremost on a sad note, Krabata is shutting down. So Krabata was one of the other subnets on Avalanche. They had the Swimmer network. They are sunsetting their subnet and moving their NFTs back to C-Chain. So that is sad. Very, very sorry to hear that. They've been a really cool project to follow. Avalanche as a whole, no. I mean, first off, as this said, daily active users just hit a new 6-month high. The chain health is as good as ever. It has users, it has transactions, it's doing its thing. So many people just get obsessed with price action in times like these and are like, oh, well, it started going up and then it couldn't hold and went a little bit back down and that means it's dead. And that's just not how that works. Like it's just not. But one thing that was talked about in this article a couple of times was a lack of confidence in the bulls, which I would challenge to mean that those aren't bulls because it kind of goes against the definition of what a bull is. However, like I am not a price analysis expert by any means. Don't, track the charts. I know you can make like different faces and stuff out of the charts and they mean different things. But one of the main things this was talking about was basically a resistance point, right? Of, it started climbing, it met resistance, and then, it couldn't break the resistance and fell back down. And that means that the bulls aren't confident enough. We're not in a market right now where the bulls are trying to break resistances, really, right? Like they want they want to be able to accumulate assets, so they're buying on the way up so that if it keeps going up, guess what? They profited. But they're not going to just over invest for the sake of breaking a resistance point. Like this is still a very volatile market time, and still, not a time of everybody's just going all in into anything. Even Bitcoin has continued to climb and fall, climb and fall, climb and fall, and it, in my opinion, probably will continue to for a little bit longer. And people immediately today, well, Bitcoin's pumping, so everything else is going with it. In my opinion, not with the way the market is right now. Bitcoin is pumping because people are fleeing banks. But when people flee banks, they go into Bitcoin. Maybe they also go into ETH. That's about as far as they go. These aren't
people are fleeing banks into the risk of an altcoin.
Right. These aren't investors. They're not looking to make plays. They're looking for a savings account, but don't trust the bank. So they're going to Bitcoin, which, whatever. But right, like they aren't like, oh, I got to pull my money out of the bank because I think they might lose it. Let me go invest into DeFi altcoins. Nope. Like that's not those aren't the Bitcoin pumps that are happening right now. Doesn't mean they won't, they will, but those aren't the pumps that we're seeing. And I mean, you can directly correlate it. The news came out about First Republic, Bitcoin went up. We know why. He really wants to just be involved.
I thought I had muted much earlier. I'm sorry.
Oh, no,
like
you
the
did.
most disruptive.
I never even heard the
Okay, good.
Yeah, you're good.
Multiple garbage rooms.
Getting banished to another room.
Okay, so Avalanche is dead. I really only brought you here today because you don't have a poker face, and I figured that if you knew that Avalanche was dead, that you would tell us with your eyebrows.
Right.
But it sounds like you still have to go to Avalanche Barcelona. People are going to be able to find you there, but I guess they won't be able to find the Krabata team.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know what their plan is, to be honest. The article they put out said that they were sunsetting the network and the game and moving the NFTs back to C chain. I hope this isn't the last we see of them.
I love to speculate wildly. I don't know if you know that about me.
I've noticed.
I do wonder what their intention is here. I wonder if it is related to some of the regulation that we're seeing. Maybe they don't want to get caught in that. They're willing to just step back, let it get regulated, and then re-enter, right? That way they have the assets and the experience, but they don't get caught up in some sort of like lawsuit or fine or something to that end. I won't be surprised if we see a lot more smaller projects do that. That being, Krabata is not exactly a tiny project, right? Like, it seems a little bit strange, but I thought that they might also be responding, I guess, to this because they brought so many international unbanked people onto the blockchain. And so I wonder if there's regulation in other countries that we're just not hearing about, that they're also trying to play safe, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe they're just tired.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think all of it's possible. And I think it very well could be a combination of all of it as well. Not only is it a volatile time, but, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but it's a very strange time in crypto, right? The market itself is very volatile. There's, price action all over the place. There's a lack of clarity on regulation, but now regulators are showing interest. It's just a very, very strange time. And it takes a lot to stay active in a market situation like this. And so, I think it's probably kind of a combination of all of it, of, potentially not having the funding. I don't know. Maybe they do. I don't know. But potentially not having the funding to continue, being kind of beaten down from all of the turns and twists and everything else that have come out. And then also being concerned about, GameFi is going to be looked at. and we're a part of that as well, obviously. But GameFi is going to be looked at. There's no doubt in my mind that yeah, it's going to be a topic. I'm not overly concerned about it being a topic, but it's going to be. And I do think that that's a consideration that developers have to make as well.
Mhm. This is kind of what you were saying about about a lack of innovation, right? We're going to see a chokehold on more and more projects, especially the small ones, and without somebody kind of burdening that, shouldering that burden of regulation or risk, we will
Yeah,
see less innovation, especially in America. So
we
seems
only
like a really funny day on the scale of FUD and love. Where are you sitting today?
on like crypto as a whole.
Yeah, yeah.
I would say I'm still 85% on the love side.
Okay, that's pretty good.
I'm not worried about crypto. It's just going to be a rough period while it gets transitioned. And, I don't think that's necessarily going to be short term. I think we'll have some clarity in the shorter term that frees things up a little bit more and opens the door again a little bit. But I think like we'll have regulation coming for probably years,
Mhm.
realistically, especially in America. We don't do anything fast. Uh, or they'll completely lose interest and move on, which is also equally possible.
Also possible, yes. I thought that might happen with AI, but it hasn't yet.
Yeah, yeah, no, the opposite has happened.
Well, a
I
bunch of
don't even.
computer companies came out, like NVIDIA, I think, and 2 other
Mhm.
ones came out and said that they don't believe in crypto anymore, and so I
Oh,
thought that
really?
might help us. Yeah, I thought some of them even stopped making graphics cards or restricted cards so that you couldn't mine with them anymore, and they moved into AI. Yeah, as though somebody who's mining can't just remove a restriction from a card, but, like,
Yeah,
whatever. Um,
right. Yeah.
what do I know?
Now I wish I had invested in 3080s though. They're probably going through the roof right now.
Okay, if people want to vehemently disagree with your opinion, they can find you at Avalanche Barcelona. Do you
In
respond
person,
on Twitter? Do they
you
have to
you
join
can
your
you can
Discord? What do they have to do?
you can vehemently disagree with me face to face in Barcelona. But aside from that, if you want to do it from the comfort of your own home, yes, I do respond on Twitter at @BolonSoron_DFK. It's very easy to find me. You can also join the DFK Discord and come yell at me. I'm always there as well. Hey, come on, let's do it. I'm
Are
happy
you
to.
a bot? Like, I don't think you sleep. You might just be an AI deepfake.
I'm actually just a very unhealthy person.
Okay, Bolin, go FUD yourself.
I love the name.
You gotta say it back.
Oh, I didn't. My bad. Go fudge yourself. I don't know.